Have you ever felt like you're actually capable of a lot more? But when you imagine people noticing you, being successful, being visible, people forming opinions about you, the idea of it kind of excites you, but the reality of it also kind of terrifies you. So instead of really going for it, you hold yourself back through procrastinating, through overthinking, and through essentially keeping yourself stuck. And it's confusing because a part of you genuinely wants more in life, but another part of you feels safer staying invisible. And this is what we call the fear of being seen. An interesting thing is, when you struggle with the fear of being seen, you also deeply crave being seen at the same time. So in this video, I'll break down 5 things: what the fear of being seen actually is, where it comes from, how it shows up in your life, why being seen can completely change the trajectory of your life, and how to heal it so you can truly step into your full potential. And if you're new here, I'm Jasmine, I'm a therapist, and I help people understand how their past experiences shape how they see themselves today, how to develop a stronger sense of self and build genuine self-esteem. If this is something you're interested in, feel free to subscribe. So what is the fear of being seen? The fear of being seen is the feeling of nervousness, fear, and discomfort when you are being perceived, when someone sees you, and when you receive attention. So you might think that if someone struggles with the fear of being seen, they just want to be invisible. But it's actually not that straightforward. When you're being deprived of something, so let's say if you didn't receive a lot of attention growing up, you simultaneously crave it deeply. So the fear of being seen sits right next to the longing and the desire to be seen. So there's this internal conflict going on where parts of you want to express yourself, wants to be seen, wants to be recognized, wants to step into your potential, but another part of you also wants to stay invisible. And when something feels uncomfortable, in this case being seen, it's usually because it's unfamiliar. So maybe you grew up in an environment where being seen or receiving positive attention wasn't as common. So therefore now being seen feels uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. So invisibility became familiar and being seen became unfamiliar. Which brings us to our next point. Where does the fear of being seen actually come from? It goes back to your early experiences of what it meant to receive attention. So if receiving attention from your parents or your caregivers became a negative experience, for example, being criticized, being corrected, being embarrassed, being told off, being punished, that attention becomes associated with something negative. So you start learning that being seen is criticism, being seen is trouble, and invisibility is safety. So now hiding becomes a way of protecting yourself, because if no one sees you, no one can criticize you, correct you, or embarrass you. Being invisible starts to feel much safer than being seen. So what does it mean to receive healthy attention compared to unhealthy attention? So imagine a child coming home from school and saying, "Hey mom, today my teacher shouted at me because I didn't know the answer to a question." A healthy response might look something like, first, the parent regulating their own emotions, and then saying something like, "I'm really sorry that happened to you. That must have felt horrible. How are you feeling?" So the focus stays on the child's experience. The child gets the space to share what happened, express how they feel, and receive support. And then depending on the situation, the parent might ask something like, do you want us to speak to the teacher, or do you want us to speak to the school? So the situation remains about supporting the child. So imagine the same scenario with a different response. An unhealthy response would be something like, "Of course the teacher shouted at you. Why didn't you know the answer? Did the other children know the answer? When did you learn about this? You should have known." Now the child not only feels criticized, but also isolated. Another version of an unhealthy response would be something like, "They did what? This is unacceptable. I'm going to call the teacher right now." So now the situation becomes about the parent's emotions and not the child's. And this is painful on so many levels, because now the child might start thinking, "I cause trouble. My existence creates problems because I created problems with my teacher by not knowing the answer. And now I've created problems for my parents for being worried and, getting upset. So I'm upsetting the people around me." And these experiences only need to happen a few times before the child learns that attention means causing problems, or expressing your needs, expressing your experience means being a burden, means upsetting and worrying your parents or the people around you. Another way the fear of being seen can develop is when you grow up in an environment when there's already a lot going on. For example, domestic conflict, substance abuse, constant stress, or some sort of chaos in the household. When there's already a lot happening at home, one of two things happen. Either the parents don't have the emotional capacity to truly see the child and their needs, or the child starts thinking, my parents already have so much on their plate, so let me not be an extra burden by, telling them my needs or sharing how I'm feeling. And that's when the child learns to minimize themselves, to stay quiet, to not ask for anything, to become as invisible as possible. So invisibility starts to become the safest option. So instead of expressing yourself, you start fading into the background. And when I talk about how your childhood and upbringing has an impact on how you see yourself today, it's not about blaming parents, because your parents did the best they could with what they knew at that time. But if difficult emotions do come up, like sadness or anger or resentment, it's so important to acknowledge them and work through them. Because if you suppress those emotions, they don't just disappear. They follow you into adulthood and show up in other relationships. That's why there are people whose parents passed away 20 years ago and they still carry such anger and resentment towards their parents, and it shows up in the other relationships. So you have to make a choice between owning your trauma or your trauma owning you. And this is something I experienced myself, because attention didn't always feel positive to me. More often, attention meant criticism or worry or being told that I had done something wrong. And at some point, it can feel like everything about your existence becomes a problem. What you wear, what you say, what you want, who you spend time with. And of course, now as an adult, I can look back and see that it came from a loving and protective place. But as a child, you don't interpret it that way. You start forming beliefs about yourself like, I'm not good enough, or something must be wrong about me. And when those beliefs form, invisibility starts to feel safer. And the way it showed up for me is through thinking, if I just stop speaking, no one can criticize me, no one can correct me, no one can use what I'm saying against me. And at one point, I practically stopped speaking, because if anything you say can be criticized or used against you, staying silent feels much safer. So I thought, if I don't say anything, I can't say anything wrong. And as children, we don't have the awareness to think, what does that say about them? What are they going through? We internalize it and we think, this is about me, something must be wrong with me, or I'm not good enough. And when you grow up like that, being seen stops feeling like an opportunity and starts feeling like a threat. And I'm not sharing this to position myself as the victim. I'm sharing it to show you that your starting point doesn't have to determine where you end up if you're willing to do the work. Because it's possible to go from a place where you barely speak, so you're not being perceived in any negative way, to now sitting in front of a camera, speaking freely, not knowing who's watching and how they interpret what you say, and being okay with that. So doing the work is not some abstract concept, it leads to tangible change in your life. So how does the fear of being seen show up as an adult? It usually shows up in two ways. The first is keeping yourself small and staying invisible. In relationships, it shows up as avoiding conflict at all costs, becoming a people pleaser, saying things like, whatever you want, I don't mind, I'm easy. Not because you truly don't mind, but because expressing your needs might lead to tension, and tension feels unsafe. So you stay quiet, even when something bothers you, even when your needs are not being met, even when you're being treated unfairly. And the way it shows up within yourself is you start suppressing your thoughts, your opinions, your needs, your emotions. And over time, that suppression leads to resentment, sadness, and anger. Because a part of you knows that you're not fully expressing who you are. And this is how the fear of being seen can hold people back the most. For example, I wanted to start a YouTube channel around 8 years ago, but I kept telling myself, I just need to read a few more books. I just need to get a bit more experience. I don't know what I would say. I don't have the right camera, I don't have the right mic, but these were just surface level reasons, and underneath them were deeper beliefs. For example, there are people who are more qualified than me, meaning I'm not good enough to be seen. Or people I know might watch my videos, which means I'm afraid of being seen trying or failing. What if people disagree with me, which means I want to be liked and accepted by everyone. What if people make fun of me? I'm afraid of being judged. So when you look closely, many of the excuses we give ourselves, procrastination, overthinking, waiting until we're ready, are often just different expressions of the same underlying fear, which is the fear of being seen. And this leads us to our next point: why being seen can change the trajectory of your life. Being seen isn't just about receiving attention, it's also about allowing your potential to exist in the world. Because the reality is that your ideas can only create impact once you express them. Your voice can only change your life once you actually use it. So when you constantly hide yourself, hold yourself back, or stay invisible, you're not only avoiding criticism, you're also avoiding opportunities, connections, and experiences that would actually move your life forward. And this is where the fear of being seen can change the trajectory of your life. Because if you never allow yourself to be seen learning, trying, improving, and sometimes even failing, the life you're capable of building never gets the chance to truly unfold. And that's the real cost of this fear. Not the criticism or the judgment, but the life you don't end up living because you stayed invisible. And this is why overcoming the fear of being seen is so powerful. Because when you allow yourself to be seen, you begin to step into your true potential. Which leads us to our next point: how can you actually start healing from the fear of being seen? The first step is awareness, because when you understand where it comes from and you understand the experiences that shaped how you see yourself today, you understand that you learned those reactions as a way of protecting yourself. So you stop seeing yourself as the problem and you recognize the pattern. And when you recognize the pattern, you're able to change it. The second step is developing a stronger sense of self, because when your sense of self is weak, you heavily rely on how other people see you. So their approval feels like validation, their opinions feel like truth. But when you start developing a stronger sense of who you are, your perspective, your beliefs, your opinions, other people's reactions stop having the same power over you. You still notice them, but they no longer define you. And the third step is gradually allowing yourself to be seen. Meditation and journaling, and even watching videos like this, are definitely valuable and helpful to some extent, but the fear of being seen is formed in relationship, which means that it needs to heal in relationship. Because the real first step in healing this fear is by allowing yourself to be seen in a safe environment. An environment where you can freely speak about your experiences, your thoughts, your emotions, your fears. And that's why doing the work with a trained professional is so powerful. Because therapy creates this space where you begin practicing something that once felt unsafe. Being seen, being heard, and expressing your truth without needing to hide parts of yourself. And often the first place we learn that it's safe to be seen is in the therapy room. So if you feel ready to take the first step and do the work in a safe and supportive environment, you can find more information in the link below. And when you start doing the work, feeling seen doesn't feel like a threat anymore, but it starts feeling like freedom. Freedom to express who you are, freedom to pursue what you want, freedom to live a life that feels authentic to you. So if you recognize yourself in parts of this video, I want to leave you with one question. In what areas of your life are you still keeping yourself invisible? And what might become possible if you allowed yourself to be seen? And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.